Thank you. I now call to order the July 27th, 2020 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. We now have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Conflict of interest statement. In accordance with North Carolina Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid both conflict of interest and appearance of conflict, and are instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before this board if there is a conflict of interest or appearance of such conflict. If a board member has a known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matter coming before this board today, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in the matter involved. Does any member of the board have a conflict of interest in any matter coming before the board today? Is there a motion to approve regular minutes of June 22nd, 2020?
I make a motion that the minutes be accepted as written.
Is there a second? Are there any changes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? New business. Item 6A on our agenda is TA 20-04, text amendment to Unified Development Ordinance related to land clearing and inert debris, LCID, landfills allowance of use in section 3.3.1 and adding standards in section 3.1.211. I'll now turn it over to Stuart.
Perfect timing. Okay, this is a text amendment that was brought to the planning board and town council by Troutman property owner Charlie Mills from 379 Murdoch Road. The background, as it was relayed to you in your staff report, is that in the old UDO, not currently, LCID landfills were allowed, both in the light industrial and heavy industrial zoning districts. There is one closed LCID landfill that we know about. It's on Byers Road. It is, or has been closed, I think, for over 2 years-ish. I'm not exactly sure when it closed, when it was capped and whatnot. But when I first started with the town, it may still have been open, kind of, sort of, but it was not really being used as a landfill. And so it's actually closed now, it's been capped down. There's going to be a structure on it relatively shortly. But let's see, the issue is that LCID landfills are a type of landfill, and the applicants can talk a little bit more in detail about it. It is a landfill type that allows a property owner or an operator to put inert debris. So it could be construction material, it could be stumps and tree material, land clearing materials of all sorts, not sanitary landfill material, into usually it's a natural depression in the ground. It doesn't always have to be, but that's the usual way to do it. And then that material is either shredded, cut, chipped, ground, or in some way usually reduced in size, and then is allowed to fill up the depression in the ground and then it's covered. And again, I'm not an expert on LCID landfills. These guys are, so they'll be able to tell you a little bit more detail about it. All the other jurisdictions that are either the county itself or the municipalities in Iredell County have a regulation that permits LCID landfills. And in the case of Iredell County, they just got through in the fall of 2019, renewing and updating their regulations that permits LCID landfills. There's not a whole lot more for me to add other than that I am recommending that the planning board and the town council deny the request for essentially three basic reasons. One, they're permitted already in all the jurisdictions around us, and in the case of Iredell County, that encompasses property that almost encircles the town of Troutman, although we do abut Mooresville and Statesville in a few locations. But they're permitted in every other jurisdiction. We do continue to permit beneficial landfills, which is essentially a type of private, if you will, LCID landfill. If a developer was building a new single-family residential neighborhood like the ones that you all have recently recommended approval for, there are usually places in the development property where the developer feels like it's not really appropriate to build a lot on. And so they'll, rather than take the cleared material off-site, have to pay to have it trucked to somewhere, to an LCID landfill, they'll just move it into the depression, the gully, the swale, whatever, and bury it there. So the on-site beneficial landfills are another way of looking at LCID landfill, but it's a private development-only version of one. So this is a request to do a text amendment so that one, LCID landfills could be allowed in one or both of the industrial zoning districts that we have. The applicants have requested both heavy industrial and light industrial. The jurisdictions around us that are thinking about, so Iredell County and Mooresville and Statesville, they have various types of industrial that are different from ours. We have two. We have the heavy industrial, which is kind of heavy industrial as you might expect it to be. Light industrial is more of a zoning district that is in line more with flex tech or indoor technology and manufacturing that doesn't have dust, noise, those sorts of negative impacts on adjacent property owners. So there's a difference there. So it's permitted around us. We already we continue to allow beneficial landfills. And then the final thing is that the town does not have to accept or approve or adopt a new use because an applicant or a property owner asks for one. It's my professional view that LCID landfills of a commercial nature are, in a fast-growing community, very likely to have negative impacts on surrounding properties, particularly surrounding residential properties. In some cases, there could be environmental justice issues related to where our industrially zoned, heavy industrially zoned properties already are, and where low-income neighborhoods are, for example. So because there is not a requirement for the town to adopt a new zoning, a new use in a zoning district, my recommendation is that the town does not need it. There are plenty of opportunities out of the surrounding county, plus in the other two municipalities around us. And we've covered the bases other than to say that a commercial LCID landfill would either be approved or not approved. Now, in the case of if you all decide to recommend approval of LCID landfills, I did want to provide you with something to base the recommendation to council on. So I'm not going to go through the recommended changes to the UDO. unless you choose, or unless you ask me to do so, unless you're thinking about doing it. However, the three basic parts of it are to add the use itself to the use matrix, then come up with standards for the use. And in this case, what I did is I looked at the Iredell County regulations that were just put into effect in the fall of 2019. I also looked at the regulations that we in our UDO had in effect up until the new UDO took effect in January of 2019, and tried to find the best relationship between the two. So my first run at it, first draft at it, was to use Iredell County because one, that's what the applicants asked for, and two, I figured theirs were more modern than the former UDO or the old UDO was. And I figured that would be a second pass at it. So that's essentially what I did with the standards. And that essentially is it. As I said, I've recommended potential changes if you choose to take them. And same thing with action. So there's an available motion to you. And then if you choose to recommend approval, then there's a motion for consistency as well. So you do have an action to take one way or another, either to recommend approval or to recommend approval with amended text, or to recommend no change, which is essentially to leave the UDO as it is, which would be in essence to recommend denial of the application to the town council. And you can also continue it, or you can table it if you choose. Either way, you'll have a motion for consistency as well, either to approve with amendments, or to reject the text amendment. And with that, I can answer any questions, or you can go ahead and turn it over to the applicant.
We'll go ahead and turn it over to the applicants right now.
They have the slide advancer and pointer, so tell me what to do.
So I'm Dr. Bradley Mills. Will be speaking on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Charlie Mills. Actually, he's my cousin, but it's not any conflict there, but he is my cousin. So I'll be representing him tonight. So, a couple things to think about is looking at the previous UDO did not have any defined requirements for LCID landfills that I could find. I looked at the UDO and I downloaded the previous one. It did not have anything defined on how they were supposed to be managed, like what restrictions were placed on them. The recommendations that Mr. Berger had given are actually very good recommendations, and we would be in support of those recommendations. I think those are, to me, those are positive reasons for supporting adding the text amendment to the use. And as Mr. Berger had mentioned earlier, we had said, let's put the old zoning ordinance said that they could be in light industrial or heavy industrial. His proposal I just recommended against, but his proposal that would be in the ordinance would be heavy industrial, and we would be fine with that as a recommendation. That way it's in the heavy industrial zoning, which to me allows more heavy manufacturing and more of that type of, in that line of business. If you look at a couple things to think about, as you look at the development around Troutman and the ETJ of Troutman, Troutman is a rapidly developing area. We all know that. There's a lot of residential use coming to the area. When you look at LCID landfills, most of their requirement or most of their customers tend to be people that are developing residential uses. Somebody goes in, they're going to build a house on a lot that's either wooded or has, a lot of brush on it. Then that's going to be cleared from the site. What ends up happening, there's, in a town or a city where you have a compact area, you can't bring a grinder in like a grinder to process wood into a house lot because there's another house right beside it. That wouldn't be safe, wouldn't be appropriate. So what we do with the LCID landfill, there's really two options. You can actually bury the material with no processing. You know, so that'd be burying large stumps, wood, any of that material, brush, and you encapsulate that material. There's no odor, there's no emissions, there's no leachate. You can't have leachate according to state law come out of an LCID landfill. So from an environmental standpoint, to me, there's very little impact, or really no impact, because there's no odor, there's, you know, no leachate, no long-term detriment to the environment. The one thing we think about Troutman, and I think that this is important, is that, you know, Troutman is also a town that, with the development around it, one thing that's critically important is, of course, truck traffic. Well, to me, if you only allow landfills outside of the ETJ, that just means your freight is even is additive. Well, you know, when you get into any kind of, you know, diesel fuel, well, guess what? The further away you move these facilities, the more environmental impact you're having, because you're running more truck traffic further away and generating more diesel fuel emissions. Just, I think to give people an idea, I put together a few slides. I'm actually operated one landfill that we had closed, and currently we're operating another LCID landfill. So this is a closed site. I'll just point out a few things. You can see a hill here in the background. There's trees behind it. So this is just looking at the site. This is looking at this is on my farm. I live north of Mooresville, really halfway between Mooresville and Troutman. So we have this, it's, you know, we've got 3-to-1 slopes on this site. It's encapsulated, it's covered, it's got grass growing on it. Basically it's a mound in an area. I actually live about 500 or 600 feet away from here. So I mean, I live near the site. I can say that there's no odors, there's, you know, noise is not an issue. Even when we're operating the site, noise was not an issue. You know, so that's what it looks like from, this is looking westerly. If you look at this site, this is the same site looking in the, basically a southern direction. You can see a lot of greenery. This is the driveway that comes in, to the site. You can see greenery here. You can see the hill in the background. If you can see that there's the line, the slope going up, and it's just a covered hill. That's what a finished site looks like. You know, that site, you know, we operated that site from 2006 until 2018. So it was a 12-year, we operated that site for 12 years. I think it's a very beneficial need for the community. One thing that I did learn is, again, trucking's everything. You know, when you're telling somebody that they've got to go 5 or 10 more miles away, you're putting a burden not on the community, but then on the contractor and everybody involved in that chain of development, you know, because you added freight to that issue. So then we actually currently operate a site. This site is in the county. This site is, you know, if you look at this site, again, you see a small mound here in the middle. And this is an area that we're building up. And this is where the trucks are turning around right here. And they're going to back into this site. And you know, that way they can dump the debris that they may be carrying. You know, one thing to think about is that there's always an attendant on site that's regulating the dumping. You know, it's not like the honor system. I mean, I believe in the honor system, but I like to verify. So we always have an attendant on site. You know, we make sure that there's no debris that cannot be taken. You know, the state regulates the debris. It's, you know, LCIDs are defined basically inert debris. You know, you think about it, it's stumps, it's brush. You know, we can take gravel, we can take dirt that's not contaminated. You know, we can't take any dirt that has any kind of contaminants in it. We can take, you know, stone and concrete, that type of material. So again, no odor, no environmental impact. This is just, go to this other site. You can just see this to the left of this site. I don't know if we can turn the lights off to make that any better, but this is basically, you know, so here's the hill, and then you'll see over here is an area we're actively filling on the side. Surrounded in trees. You got trees around the perimeter. We do as Mr. Berger recommended. We already have screening at that site as well, and that's in the requirement under the proposed possibility to put in the UDO. So, you know, a couple other things to think about. You know, so again, what I would say, one comment that I did notice, and Mr. Berger mentioned it earlier, is the site on Byers Road is actually being used. There's fresh material being dumped right in it. So I'm not going to say whether that's appropriate or not, but there is material being dumped in that site. To me, that would also demonstrate need in the Troutman ETJ area, because somebody is reopening that site and currently using it. So to me, that's also going to call for some need in the ETJ or in the Troutman city limits. And that would be my thought, that is a possibility. That is demonstrating a need. So, we mentioned earlier, grinding is a way to reduce the landfill space and to compact it tighter. Another benefit of grinding this material on site is actually to ship the material out is either decorative mulch or boiler fuel for green energy. It can be burned for energy. To me, so that's an ancillary use that goes along with an LCID. Again, you don't have to grind anything in an LCID. You can technically just bury all the material. But to me, if you can reduce that waste stream and make it usable, that's a beneficial thing for the community. So I think there's some benefits there to allow that. Also, what you do if you have the LCID and the grinder together at a site, you can bury stuff that's appropriate to bury, like you get big chunks of concrete. Well, we can't crush concrete. That wouldn't be in the ordinance. This would only be wood material. So we would bury that stuff. We could sort that out of the waste stream and bury that material, any dirt, rock, concrete, and then you can grind the wooden waste to make it a better use. So I think the big concern, one concern is always the noise level impact. So I think this is very appropriate to kind of give people an idea of what you're thinking about. So I start at the top of the list. Well, chainsaws are about the loudest thing that the community operates. I mean, a lot of people have a chainsaw. It's 110 decibels. A hand drill. Most everybody in the room probably has a hand drill or has used one. They're pretty loud at 98 decibels. Then you look at, you start in with heavy equipment. So if you look at the requirements that Mr. Berger has recommended, if you would choose to think about the ordinance, then if you look at that, he's saying a 300-foot setback from any build or basically any residence. So it's 100 feet from any property line, in which I think that's appropriate, and that's mostly screening. When we do the sites that I have, we usually use the 100 feet for screening. It's either natural vegetation or, and there's going to be a berm possibly there as well, but you got some natural vegetation, you got screening in that 100 feet, and you can't use that 100 feet as basically buffer. Then the 300 feet is what's important because that gives you the sound reduction. So if you look at sound reduction, let's start with this is a tub grinder, which is commonly used to process wood. At 100 feet is 75 decibels, which happens to be the same noise that a car generates when it's driving away on the street. So, most people, their house in a residential area is probably 20 to 50 feet from the street. Well, the car actually generates the same amount of noise as a grinder would at 100 feet. We're not going to be at 100 feet. We're going to be at 300 feet. So we're 3 times that distance away based on the recommendation or the possibility of the recommendation in the ordinance. So we'd be out here at about 300 feet. So now our level's down to 66 decibels. And that's huge. This study here came out of the Center for Construction and Research Training and also some data out of Penn State. But again, there's also other published studies out of California that I can give you that information if you need it. But this is very much in line with the type of grinders you deal with. The picture I showed you was actually a horizontal grinder. Horizontal grinders are actually safer than tub grinders, and that's what we'd be looking at, would be a horizontal, because the material can only go one direction. It can't go any other direction. But again, when you think about this, so now we get down to a lawnmower at 60 decibels, and a normal conversation is also at 60. So I think the beauty of the ordinance is it also will protect the neighborhoods. These are heavy industrial areas. These are heavy industrial areas, but yes, there are going to be the possibility of a neighbor. Well, that residential neighbor has got to be a minimum of 300 feet away. So then you're 100 feet from any property line. So minimum 300 feet, but then also 100 feet from your interior property line. So you've got a good separation in the proposed ordinance for basically to control noise levels, to protect anybody in the surrounding area. Because even in a heavy industrial area, you're still 300 feet from a residence. You're 100 feet from a property line. So I think when you look at that, I think there's some opportunity there that we know we're not going to have a negative impact on the community or a negative impact on the environment. So I think those are all positive things to think about, including in the ordinance. And it's also going to benefit as Troutman grows. Well, why don't we grow in a way that we can control traffic, we can decrease truck traffic, and we can potentially even generate a product that can be used in neighborhoods. We can make this wood waste into a usable product, either for boiler fuel for power generation, That's what it's commonly used for, is power generation and or for mulch, in any neighborhood. So, the things I think about is, okay, we've got appropriate screening. We'll have no environmental impact because one is, we know the material stream coming in. We are controlled by, and Idle County does your erosion control, is that correct? So erosion control monitors these sites every 30 days. So we know there's a county official at the site every 30 days because they're looking to make sure there's no sediment leaving the site. No sediment impacting any stream on the site, no sediment leaving the site. Yeah, that's an inspection that happens every 30 days, like clockwork, until the site's completely closed. Because there's land disturbance, so therefore that lasts the whole life of the project. Then the other thing is we are regulated by the state as well. Of course, the municipality would be regulating. If there's any complaints, it's all would be in the ordinance that, if there was something outside of of the amendment that you didn't, hadn't met one of the requirements. And then the state also does regular inspections. That would be the North Carolina DEQ, their solid waste division. They do inspections, and they do a regular inspection, but it's also complaint driven. So anything is complaint driven. So if there's any complaints, whether it's erosion control, waste stream, anything like that, that's all we have agencies that monitor that. So, so I think those are things that are very important. And I agree. I think we have no problem with, I think the heavy industrial is the appropriate place to put this. Just make sure I have a few more comments. So I think that those are positive things. So I'm just going to try to summarize, and then I'll be glad to answer questions as well. So on the summary slide, okay, the key points that I would say are in favor of this amendment is it's heavy industrial zoning. I'm good with that. We don't need the light industrial. I think heavy industrial is appropriate, would fit to me that what the town is proposing, what the town is going to look like if we look at how Troutman will be developed in the future. I talked about this, 100 feet from any property line. So even in an industrial area, we're still 100-foot separation from any other business. So to me that, that gives you some spatial separation. If you happen to be near a home, that has to be 300 feet. Any of your activity, you can't landfill, you can't process material, you can't do anything that is associated with the landfill, except let's say maybe store equipment. But you can't, and that 300-foot buffer separates you from residential uses. And to me, so that's what I think about. All right, I'm 300 feet from a residence. I'm probably at 60 to 65 decibels at the most on noise. That would be, that to me suffices that you're not going to hinder a community or have a negative impact on a community. And then again, from an environmental standpoint, we have to maintain 50 feet from all surface waters. Again, that's checked every single month for sure by erosion control, that there's no sediment leaving the site, that we put in the appropriate state mandated measures to control dust and sediment, that there's no environmental impact. Again, it's also 100 feet from commercial buildings and wells. We don't want any environmental impact. Again, we don't want anything to impact the water table. We actually you cannot bury anything in the water table. You have to be above the water table by 4 feet. So there's no impact on the water table, and there's no impact on wells or water supply. Another thing is controlled access. Again, we're going to have the regulation. You're going to have an attendant on site. You're going to have gates when the facility's closed. We don't operate outside of normal business hours. We're not operating at night. We're not, operating in the dark. We're basically, normal operating hours. So we control the access during those times that we're not open, and you have somebody there to make sure that you only take the appropriate material. Dust control, we'd have a dust control plan so that your dust would not have an impact on other properties, whether it's track out or whether there's no dust that can blow to another property. You have to put forth a plan to show how you're going to control that. And then we also look at screening around the entire operation. I'm going to look strongly at normal vegetation if it's available, if there's existing vegetation, but then also the ordinance that's been proposed would say that we need some physical barriers like a berm at the entrance, like you'd have a berm so that you wouldn't see into the site, with some appropriate landscaping according to the town's requirements. To me, that's kind of my thoughts. I think I've got experience that I speak from. I believe I know that we can operate in harmony with the community. We did that since 2006 at the old site. We're currently on another site operating that we're in harmony with the community there. So I think based on what I know about how they operate, what the proposed ordinance could be, I think this would be beneficial to the town of Troutman as it develops, but not have negative impacts on the town at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Mills.
You're very welcome.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Mills?
Yes, sir.
There's a site down Raleigh School Road in Mooresville. Are you familiar with that site? It's on the
So,
lake just before you get to the point.
yeah, so that's one of those sites that probably was not well regulated. That site was it's on McKinley. What's that? Yeah.
Check with-
Yeah. So that site was not appropriately managed. That site did have, they didn't cover it according to state regulations. State regulation says you need to put a foot of soil over the site every 30 days or every time the site is over a half acre or an acre. That site has issues because they did not appropriately cover it, and that site actually caught on fire 20 years ago. What's that?
Numerous times.
That's correct, yeah, numerous times.
The regulations were also totally different at that age, correct?
Yeah, so you have to think about, and again, that site's a 30-year-old site at this point, 30 to 40. I mean, I remember when I was a young kid being there. But yeah, I think that was a site that was probably inappropriately managed. If you look, there's one is we've got a history of operating a site, and operating it safely, a current site and a previous site. And I think the key is having it covered properly. Compacting the material, putting appropriate dirt cover over it in layers, and that way you don't get any burning or anything like that. Burning is not allowed on the site. If you look at the current ordinance that is a possible suggestion in the application that Mr. Berger has written up, no burning is permitted. The other thing is if it does catch on fire, you also can be fined not only by the city, but Department of Air Quality at the state. So, I mean, we're going to operate in harmony with the community, and that would be the furthest thing. I think our track record, I think we'd be fine. But I do know the site you're referring to.
I have a question. You said that the site on Byers Road was closed, but apparently somebody's using it. Besides that example, how do we know there's a need in the community?
So I think one is when you look around, so when you look at the development, so at my current site, we get debris coming out of the ETJ of Troutman. We have so I know we've got need coming to our current site. I think that, so I know that from my current experience, because we're getting the material out of the ETJ of Troutman. There's no doubt about that. We know where the developments are. They're regular customers of ours. Plus the site on Byers Road. So kind of got through that point of view. So I think that's the thing you've got to look at is it might sound good that, we can put them in the county. Well, citing these locations is not that easy. I mean, there's still the 300-foot requirement. You got to be 300 foot from any residence. And the problem is when you start looking in, let's say the southern part of Iredell County, like you get below Statesville and you say, I want to find a tract of land that I can utilize that's 300 feet from any house that meets the requirements for the county and for the state specifications, they become limited. This is something, when I started the site that I had in Mooresville in 2006, I didn't realize, think about how much more development's happened since then. Well, the more development that occurs, the harder it is to site these locations. Because I've looked at other places. I wouldn't come to Troutman and ask for something if I didn't feel it was needed. And to me, when you look at Troutman's location and the heavy industrial parcels that are available, there's opportunity in the town of Troutman, one, to do a service for the Troutman residents and the ETJ looking at further development. And then you're going to have some surrounding use because if you abut up to Mooresville, there's going to be debris. Like currently right now, there are only 2 active DEQ and county approved LCID landfills in the whole county. There's only 2 of them. So to me, the siting requirements are saying that even in the county, it's not like, it's in the county, we can go do it. There's none active in Mooresville. There's none active in the limits of Mooresville, none active in the limits of Statesville. But I think when you look at the whole county, you think how the development's going in in Iredell County, especially southern Iredell County, again, if they were easy to install and they were something that could be put in, again, there would be more than 2 of them. You know, and there's only 2 that are currently active and approved in the whole, in southern Iredell County. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Who's allowed to use the landfill? Because you were saying like with your current site, people from the ETJ or Troutman are coming to your current site. So if you were to have one in Troutman, is it limited just to county residents, or could any of the surrounding county residents come and use your site?
So the site is technically open to the public. So what happens is you're gonna get, when you go to the trucking mentality, when you look at hauling this debris, this bulky debris, you're gonna get a radius around that site. So it's mostly gonna be Troutman and the immediate Troutman area. But you're gonna have some that comes, I would say, outside of the ETJ of Troutman, but still in Iredell County. If you look at the sites that we operate, and the current one we operate, again, that's pretty much what you're getting. You're getting that probably, most of your business is within 5 to 10 miles of the site, is what I would say. But really, mostly within the county limits would be the most of the further extent, but it is open to the public. So you could get other debris coming in, but again, it has to meet the requirements of what we can legally accept. And again, you know, that's the key, but it can come from other areas. But usually freight is gonna limit that. And that's the big issue that we see with these sites, is, you know, they're not gonna bring it all the way over from like Lincoln or Catawba County. It's just, the distance is too far, and you know, that's very uncommon.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you were, just to help me understand the landfill, so you have one that's getting ready to be capped or has closed?
Yeah, the one I showed you, the very first one is capped. It's capped, and we're getting ready to do the final inspection. This one here is capped. We're getting ready, and that's the same, that's a different picture, but that one is capped, and we're getting ready to do the final inspection with DEQ to formally close it.
So then my question is, for how long is that land unusable?
So the land is not buildable after you utilize that space. That's one reason we looked at reducing the amount going into it. So that land is gonna be green space. The current recommendation from DEQ is they do a 10-year monitoring period. Again, you know, to make sure that everything's settled, there's no leachates, there's no odors, no negative impacts. At the end of that 10-year period, my understanding is it's basically, it's up to the landowner how they want to utilize that property. So it could become green space, it could become forestry, it could technically become open park space. You just can't build structures on the physical landfill site. So let's say you look at, just to give you an idea, let's say you're looking at a 20-acre property. Well, with all the setbacks on a 20-acre property, you may only use 6 acres of it for the LCID. Because when you put all the setbacks in place, you know, so now you got, let's just say example, you got a 20-acre HI, heavy industrial zone property. Well, you may utilize with all the setbacks, 6 acres of that site. Now that 6 acres that has material buried on it is gonna be your green space or your open space. The other 14 acres around it is still open to any heavy industrial use or any other use for that matter. But so that's what you're thinking about. Like this site here is actually a 2-acre site in the middle of like 30 or 40 acres. So again, I'm only impacting, you know, that's when I think about waste reduction. If I can reduce that waste, then I can preserve the space. And then, like say that, then you got, so to me, that's beneficial. But you are going to have a small area that's going to become green space. But it can be after the 10-year period, it can be planted trees. It can, you know, it can become, you know, any type of open space use that you would desire.
And your second site is on how much acreage?
The second site, this site here is on 10 acres, and we're only utilizing 2 acres of it. So again, you got 8 acres that will be usable. Because when you look at all the setbacks.
Is it visible from the road or any other properties?
In the summertime, it's very little visibility. We've got berms around the site. You know, I think I've got 6 to 8 foot berms around the site. You know, the vegetation is green right now. You see very little. You know, and so that's the thing where I look at the 100-foot setbacks. That's why I primarily use them as buffers. I mean, but you know, from the visual standpoint.
I missed it. Where's your second site?
The second site is, in the Amity Hill area.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
So during the 12-year operation of your soon-to-be closed site, so the period of operations during the day is,
I mean, the current site, we're open 8:30 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. I mean, we're bankers hours.
right? And so for 12 years, how many truck trips per day do you think you might have throughout the course of a general average work week?
So I would say, an average work week, you're gonna look at about, I'm gonna say, just using the average off the current site and the old site, you're probably somewhere between 10 to 20 trucks. So it's not high volume, like we would think is in and out, in and out. It's usually between 10 to 20 vehicles, I think would be a good average to look at.
So 20 to 40 vehicle trips per day
Mhm.
on average for 12 years. And I want to make sure.
I'm sorry, you said 15 trucks a day or?
I'm gonna say 10 to 20, and then he's doubling to call it trips, I think.
Each trip, in and out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry, I apologize, I forgot to carry the one.
Well, I'm not a math major, so I'll probably get myself.
Let me ask, because you asked a question per day and he said per week.
Yeah, so I did the math backwards in my head. I'm thinking like 50 loads a week divided by 5, 50 to 100.
I got
Because what you'll see is, of course, weather impacts us. When it's wet, we may not be open if it's really wet, because, of course, our customers aren't working at that time. But yeah, you're looking at basically 10 to 20, I think is a very good estimate.
Yeah, so really what I'm trying to ask is, and you've answered, is the scale of the amount of traffic that is generated into or onto a road that's in the jurisdiction. And so there's one half of the traffic and truck traffic congestion issue, which this particular operator would be trying to suggest would be minimized. So, fewer trips out, if you will. On the other hand, that needs to be tempered with the idea that there will be truck trips in and then back out to any landfill, whether it's LCID or any other landfill that's commercially operated within the jurisdiction. And that brings me to really more of a comment than a question. As a reminder to the planning board, and I will give the same reminder to the council, that this application is not for a particular operator, nor is it for a particular location. This would be a jurisdiction-wide text amendment to the UDO that would permit LCID landfills to go onto any heavy industrially zoned property. So we've talked about that, and just as another caveat to that, remember that this is really essentially existing heavy industrial, because any new heavy industrial zoning carries with it a conditional zoning requirement that goes through you all for a recommendation of the council with a conceptual plan and everything else that is required with conditional zoning. So from the standpoint of jurisdiction, make sure you're thinking about the recommendations that you will make in terms of the overall community, both the corporate boundary that we have, but also the ETJ boundary. So all the zoning jurisdiction we have. And then remember the nuances of the zoning district. So heavy industrial that we currently have, that you have on your map, and the potential for new heavy industrial that's become about later as a request from any operator of LCID.
Any other questions, Mr. Harris?
I understand you say there's 2 DES approved landfills.
DEQ.
DEQ landfills in South Iredell County. Where are they located?
One of them is our site in the Amity Hill Road area, and then the other one is on Weathers Creek Road, which is actually pretty close to where we're at. Those are the 2 sites that are active and approved by DEQ that I'm aware of.
Was there one on Barfield Road?
That was the one I closed. That's
That's
the,
Barfield?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Barfield right there. The operating house.
Wasn't there one, or isn't there one on East Mambo? back, you can't see it's back in the woods. And they actually burn stuff there.
Here's what the county zoning law says. The county zoning law says that you cannot have a air current burner outside of an LCID landfill, or I think it was in one of the attachments that Mr. Berger gave you, they got a new zoning requirement called R67, which is called a source reduction site, which would be, grinding debris or possibly burning it. The site on East Monroe Road is neither of those. They do not have county approval that I'm aware of. So that site may have some issues. But I am aware, or I've heard that there may be a burner out there. But again, my understanding, if you look at county jurisdiction, it is not within the law. It's operating outside of the requirements because it has not been approved through the county special use permit.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other comments or any questions from Mr. Mills? We may have some later. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I will now open the meeting up for public comment on text amendment TA 20-04. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this text amendment? I know you may have some.
We did not get any public comment for this case.
Okay. I will now close the public comment time. Are there any comments from the board?
I'm just, in regard to the question of whether there is a need for this, I think we need to consider not the recent past or the current, but the fact that the town council has already approved 2,500 to 3,000 homes to be built over the next 3 to 5 years. So I think we need to look at it from that standpoint.
Any other comments?
Well, I mean, I agree with you on that point. I also think about all the time and effort that went into creating our new UDO and the recommendations that we had from the other agencies. And while I appreciate all the work that Mr. Mills did, and I mean, it definitely does look like it is a controlled and clean type of heavy industrial, I'm always leery about going back in and adding things into our UDO that then open it up to other parties to do the same thing.
I do have another question about the one you were talking about had been reopened. If it was closed, Mr. Mills, if it was closed, was it officially closed or did you know?
Are you talking about the one on Byers Road?
Yes, sir.
I don't know that, and I can speak to it a little bit just because I drive past it a good bit. I don't know that it was ever, I don't really know the permitting part of it as much as Mr. Mills would. So it appeared to me that it was closed and covered and nothing was being placed on the site 6 months ago, I guess, pre-COVID. But however recent those pictures were.
Last week.
Then that means that something else is going on. I've had a conversation with the property owner of that site, not to ask him whether or not the LCID landfill was open or closed, but he was talking about putting a structure on the front part of the property, which is not the part where the landfill would prohibit it. So my assumption in talking to him about the structure was that the entire thing was permanently closed, but the pictures obviously prove differently.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like you, I just did a drive-by. I was aware of the site that there had been one in the past, and I just drove by and said, hey, here's what we got going on, so.
All right, thank you.
Anyway.
All right, Mr. Mills, that brings up another question. You said there was going to be an attendant on site, so would that mean you would be building a structure as well as like a office or something for this attendant?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there would have to be a building, to me, there'd be a building for an attendant to utilize as an office. And then there might be a storage area to store any supplies we needed, to work on equipment or anything like that. Yeah, but that would still require a building permit and, all the proper approvals according to the heavy industrial site.
Thank you.
Could you put up, or I don't know if you have it, the heavy industrial district or all the map? I know we have it in our package, but I don't know if you have it.
Let me see. This may take a second. I have to connect to the boardroom's Wi-Fi, which as Councilman Henkel knows is sometimes problematic. You have it on your screens. Now, if I can see that far. To pull up a cursor would help. Well, for whatever reason, I'm thinking no.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, here we go. Hold on. All right, there we go. You see that green bar working across the screen? That's how slow the Wi-Fi is at this moment.
It says quick access.
That's what it's trying to get to.
Fast food says fast food.
Yeah. Pull up the map that was in the packet that followed. I can't get into the Wi-Fi. I mean, into any of it at the moment. Okay, let's try your phone.
Okay.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it is not.
I guess we'll just have to do what we got on paper.
What's your question?
I was just wanting to see it a little bit bigger as far as the heavy industrial. I don't know if you need to But anyway, all these, every one of these that's currently heavy industrial is something that would, this would apply to without, conditional use.
That is correct, yes.
So, that's a little bit of a concern to me. Some of these may not be appropriate, but would be allowed if we did this without conditional zoning. It's just hard to, it's so small, it's hard to tell exactly, I know where most of it is. I would be more comfortable with it, it's all conditional zoning. Okay, I guess everybody had a chance to look at that best we can. And this is not just about Mr. Mills' project, like you just said, I don't want to mistake that. Again, it's, and you may do a good job, somebody else may not, you know. I know there are rules to be followed. But we have, at this point, we have the following options for a text amendment: to recommend as presented, recommend with the amended text, specify as applicable, recommend that change in the UDO, leave current text in place, continue the request to a specific meeting, date, time, place in order to facilitate additional dialogue or provision of specific information specified as applicable in the motion, or table the request maximum of 30 days. Is there a motion for recommendation regarding text amendment TA 20-04?
I recommend no change to the current UDO.
All right, is there a second? Second. Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
You all,
We can,
please raise your hands.
we'll do a show of hands, all those in favor, aye. Opposed? You get that? Okay. Other business.
Before that, you still have to make a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we need a motion regarding consistency statement regarding text amendment TA 20-04.
I make a motion to deny, the text amendment and to our current UDO with regards to TA 20-04.
Second.
That motion was made right previously with the consistency.
I make the motion to deny the zoning text amendment and to make the finding that though the denial is inconsistent with the adoption of with the adoption of the 2030 Horizon Plan, said denial is responsible and to the public interest and does not further the goals of the 2030 Horizon Plan. The work.
So I was trying to catch that.
I read it.
So what you read was, the motion for consistency, item A, except you inserted, that it was inconsistent rather than consistent. Is that correct?
Though the denial is inconsistent.
That's what I'm asking, is, that's what you said, right? Correct?
What was the-
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
You read-
you read that one.
Yes. But use that.
Yes.
That's not, well, that will work. So what Kim handed you was the county's,
Oh,
was the county's, motion to deny.
where's the one with pages on?
And so
Well, I read the one on page
Yeah,
7.
I think Karen's is the correct one to use. The
I'll
one
try
on
my
page 7, okay. So,
Okay, sorry,
Uh-huh.
that happens sometimes. So,
but
Karen, what you are gonna need to do is essentially use example A and say that it is inconsistent. So flip that, inconsistent with the 2035 future land use map and UDO, so on and so forth.
Okay, so,
Or use example B, make a motion to deny the request due to, and then add your language as you see fit.
Do we need to pull the other one we just said off?
I retracted my statement.
he retracted his statement.
So I'll just point out, consistency statements for an inconsistent project are
Okay,
tough
well,
tough to craft, and sometimes they're made on the spur of the moment, because you never know what the issue is gonna be. And so don't feel like this is something that you should have a ready answer for. I'll just say that based on experience, it's not. You can take your time and think about it. You can wordsmith it together, however much you need to, or Karen, you can add as much as you need to that. So, that's what she listed.
Right, okay. Person,
We need to take a second to write it down as you say, verbatim, so you need to get it.
I have to ask Mark another question. Okay, I don't want to move on this thing. Okay, we concur. You ready? I make a motion to deny the request due to its inconsistency with the 2035 future land use map and unified development ordinance, as it would permit a type of land use with specific standards that is not compatible with land uses within the town. Further, the proposed text amendment has elements that are unreasonable and not in the public interest.
Yeah. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Show of hands. Opposed? Show of hands. Under business, now, town council makes the final decision on this. Make recommendations. I'm sure you're aware of that. The meeting is, when is it? Town council.
Town council meeting will be on the 13th of August.
Okay, other business. Town council planning and zoning action update. And I'll turn it over to George.
Okay, so the first thing I want to do is introduce the person to my right. So Ryan Grisbeck is the town's new town manager, and he has come to us from the wonderful municipality of Pittsboro. Is it Wake County?
It's Chatham County.
Chatham County. And has been with the town for all of 2 weeks-ish, 2 weeks-ish. And he wanted to come and observe the planning board meeting, but hopefully he won't necessarily have to come to all of them, but he's certainly welcome. But I wanted to make sure that you all had the opportunity to meet Brian, and he had the opportunity to meet you and see how things work in a semi-standard meeting as we're moving forward through this pandemic. So that's the first thing, and the second thing, I'll fill you in on the town council recent actions that they took at their July meeting that was a couple of weeks ago. So as you recall, there were 2 rezoning applications that were both approved. You all recommended approval of both of them. So the Wilson property, which is the property that was formerly heavy industrial, that has now been formally rezoned to central business. That's at the intersection of Litton Street and Tower Street. And then the second one is the Elliott property, which was rezoned not to O&I, as you all recommended as the planning board, but to central business from town residential. That's the big white house at 124 North Eastway Drive that is subject of a future development project to convert it into a freestanding restaurant. Although it's central business, so the property owner has the ability to do any of the uses in central business. The third case was the electronic message board panel text amendment. The town council approved that one as well. They approved it with your recommended grammatical fix. Thank you again for that. That's much appreciated. So as of this point, applicants who would like to have a principal ground-mounted freestanding sign could put electronic message board panels in those sign faces, according to standards. The other thing that they did, because of the matter of the New Life Missionary Baptist Church being not the applicant for this text amendment, because that was the town council, but the reason for the text amendment in the first place is that they agreed to waive the Board of Adjustment fee for New Life Missionary Baptist so they could proceed with a variance application as soon as they can pull their application together. We're working with them on that, and the Board of Adjustment will hear it as soon as we can schedule a meeting and have it here. The only other thing I have to add is that coming up in the August planning board meeting, there will be the new proposal called Smith Village, which is actually 2 conditional zoning cases. This is going to be a new way of addressing conditional zoning. So Smith Village is a proposed horizontal mixed-use development that will have up to 250,000 square foot of commercial space attached to, I believe it's 74 or 75 proposed single-family detached single-family homes, as well as up to 175 single-family attached, so townhomes. The location proposed is, the main entrance is at the intersection of Cross-Eye Lane and US 21 South. So across the intersection from Iredale Charter Academy, but the project is fairly large. So you can imagine it takes up a fair amount of property. There are 11 parcels or 10 parcels altogether in the project. The reason I'm bringing it to your attention now is to sort of set the stage, and for the reason why there are 2 concurrent conditional zoning applications at the same time. HB does not allow single-family detached as a land use. mixed residential does not allow, commercial in it. Therefore, they want to do a large, horizontal mixed-use project. They want to do it all at the same time roughly and do it together. The way that we've worked out so that they can do that is to have two cases. So the conditional zoning, mixed residential is only for the single-family detached pod area. The conditional zoning HB is for the commercial and the single-family attached residential. Works fine for us. It fits with the UDO. Everything is great. It was just one of those things that probably wasn't contemplated when the UDO was put together, and the conditional zoning for HB and mixed residential didn't really contemplate the full range of the mix of land use, which is not unusual. And so in this case, I think it'll go quite smoothly. The community meeting is going to be on the afternoon of August 6th. So that's a Thursday. It's going to be at 5 o'clock. We're going to have it in this room. We're going to have one presentation from the applicant. We'll do it on this screen. So it'll be only for an hour. We won't do a 2-hour window. Just trying to limit the amount of potential for exposure and all those other social distancing issues. But like I said, the community meeting is going to be on the 6th. Then you will have an opportunity to have a public comment period at your August meeting, and then the council will take action on it in their September meeting. Of course, there's an intervening council meeting. The annexation for the project will be initiated at the August council meeting too, but that's not really relevant to what the planning and zoning board does. Other than that, I think that's all I have. Oh, that's right. So there is one other thing. The new state statute known as 160D, which is an effort of the legislature to combine the municipal and the county zoning enabling legislation into one set of super laws, super regulations. Also has other elements in it, one of which is that all members of public appointed boards, planning and zoning boards included, need to be sworn in as duly sworn public officials. So it's not all that unusual, really. The Board of Adjustment has already done theirs. And so we wanted to make you aware of it so that at next month's meeting, you will have your official swearing in. It's not like bring the family. But you are sworn in, and you can use the Bible or not. We have them. We'll do it all at once, and then you actually have to sign your name that you agree to uphold the Constitution of the state and all that sort of stuff. Kim will be in charge of that, but I wanted to let you know up front.
You get a badge?
You don't get a badge or anything. So that's right.
You get a certificate, so you won't forget.
Yeah, you don't get a certificate either.
What about a t-shirt? I'm sure they'll handwrite you one out.
That's right. I'll handwrite you a t-shirt. I'll put it on the back of
We'll
the
definitely cut it,
I think that's it. Kim, do you have anything else? Okay. That's all we have.
All right, thank you, George. Thank you. I guess when you're gonna have public comments, is it gonna be like this, or do we not know yet? Next.
On Smith Village, we don't know. There's, not to read anything into the current situation, but there's a possibility that we might be going back to phase 1 again. In which case, if we do that, we'll more than likely not hold meetings, just like we did when we were in phase 1 before. But if we do have meetings, more than likely they will be pretty much just like this. We don't have enough staff to monitor public comment and do a Zoom meeting for the planning and zoning board, for example. and reasonably, we can manage public comment. If there were a whole hallway full of the public who want, well, if there were a hallway with members of the public, we would do what we did at the last meeting, where we would hold folks out in the lobby, 6-foot separation between them, ask them to come to the podium, give their public comment, and then leave and let the next person come in. So just like last month's meeting, it would be a little bit of a process, but we would get through it. It would just take a while to work through that.
And we were, these were the applicants and such as that, but what about for the people from the public?
Same thing. We don't really have much of an opportunity to do otherwise. We don't have the ability to have a full room full of members of the public.
I know you're taking comments, you know, they were emailed or.
Yep, we're doing that now. If there had been a member of the public who would wish to comment, they can provide an emailed comment. They can also, I think they can leave Kim a voicemail. So,
Email, mail, well, it states email, mail, or streaming, not
Sure.
streaming,
or-
live streaming.
Oh. Not in person, handing you a piece of paper.
It depends on what phase, we're back into. If it's still like it is now, I mean, they can wait outside, we can go usher them in, and then leave. And that's what's in there. And that's how.
And when you have your, almost the 6th, I'm not sure how you'll be able to do that.
So we're gonna set the meeting room up so that everything is facing this screen here. And we're gonna set out chairs. I think we've figured out that we can have 24 or 25 people all together.
Right.
We'll use the dais and we'll set up as many chairs as we can get in here to allow for proper social distancing, the 6-foot separation. Will still require masks, and as you found out, we have some if people don't bring them. And as I mentioned, we'll have one presentation rather than a constant presentation. We won't have anything on tables that people can circle around the table to look at. We're trying to do the best we can with the situation we're dealt with. And I actually did a call to the planning community across the state through the listserv about this or that very thing. And for the most part, the community is sort of divided. The community of planners are sort of divided. Either they're saying, don't do it at all, or we're not doing it at all in our jurisdiction. Or they're saying that they're doing it somewhat similar to us. They're trying to make the best that they can, but they understand that there's gonna be somewhat of a limitation of public access. Just this afternoon, I suggested to a property owner that is adjacent to the project, that because the project team is still working on their proposal, they're revising things up until the point of the community meeting, that it's fine with me if they actually have comment with the applicant team prior to the meeting, because we don't need to have anything formally submitted that is going to be set in stone until the staff report goes to the planning board. So if they're revising things either up to the community meeting or as a result of the community meeting, if that's a way to get additional public input, that's perfectly fine. It's not only is it legal and proper, it's also a good way to manage things that we can during this time period that we have to work with.
And I guess they could have, if they felt necessary, they have multiple ones if there was.
Yeah, we can, that's right. You know, one community meeting, if that turns out not to be enough, we can certainly have another.
Okay.
George, can we not use the new facility over at CATS?
Hadn't thought about that, but
Bigger?
potentially, yeah, it's certainly bigger and it's got AV facilities as well. Let me look into that. That's a great suggestion. I appreciate you making it.
I know at one time, Cass had said that there was allowing.
They, I suggest that, and, there was kind of pros and cons with the council on that. So I think, if necessary, we need to do it, or we need to know ahead of time,
Right.
I would hate to rent cats and 2 or 3 people show up. So it was a suggestion that, anybody, adequate time for people to reply. And if we have enough, and we need to go to cats, we can, we can make necessary arrangements. Otherwise, then we would meet here. That's out there, even though it's the court of last resort.
Well, and to add to that, even though it's a large, 68 total acres of property, but there are not that many surrounding property owners. And I don't want to say the majority of them, but at least a good percentage of them are either also large property owners. So it's reduced the number of actual surrounding property, but also a number of them own multiple parcels in the same block or in the same neighborhood. So there's not that many members of the public that would be directly affected. Now, obviously, with a project of this scale, that's going to have a pretty sizable impact on the community in that area. But most of the big property owners that are around it have already, they've all been notified, the ones that are immediately adjacent and within 500 feet. So we've taken care of a lot of that. And so far, I've only had one comment, but that's not necessarily indicative of what it's going to turn out to be.
Okay, thank you, George. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Yes, sir.
I guess we're told both.
I'm sorry.
Well, we'll dig into now.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was thinking of that as well. They'll go to the town.
Yeah, next,
For just 3 years and all.
I appreciate it.
Exactly.
Not all that is similar to this, it's just a few of the members. So they'll be a meeting person and same kind of thing. And Ken, what do you think about the presentation? Will the council let them do the same presentation with the slides and stuff, or?
That's a lot.
I mean, it's-
Just, can you make a copy of it and just put it in?
Oh, yeah, we do
Now,
that.
are you gonna be able to, let's see. Zoom?
Actually, I can put it in the staff report package.
Yeah.
Yeah, the slides. Yeah, that would work. Or you can email.
No. You send it to me.
If you do
But if you do a PowerPoint, actually, yeah, if you do a PowerPoint.
Actually,
Yeah, get them safe.
Yeah, I'm not, no, I'm not. Yeah, I'm just staying in a hotel.
As far as.
No, way back, the previous life, I did 1 hour each way, and that got pretty old.
it's a public hearing. So there's slight differences.
Almost 2 years.
Essentially, the process is the same.
You know, and I didn't like that
So
way.
generally, usually open up.
Some days it's all right, getting character, you know, what I had to do, that sort of thing. It's really hard doing what we do, you know, a night meeting like this. You know, an hour. This was efficient. So, factor in the back.
The slides, they don't, most of them are just pictures.
I didn't know. No, this is, the opportunity was here, and I had resigned my
Pretty good
job.
on time.
Okay.
For that.
And then the pandemic,
And then the
This was actually the
council
second,
asked just like,
this was actually the second resume that I sent.
but it's a little bit more formal.
This is the second community that I sent a resume to.
I know, he does that.
So I looked at a
This is
few
a
other
little bit
places,
because
circle back to this one.
text amendments
So I started.
don't, because they're jurisdiction wide, there's not a requirement to have.
I've always worked with small
They interact, they do, they do, they do. They need structure, they need
My
this.
dad's still on city council, and now I grew up
Council,
It's kind of like
the
the-
planning
right,
board
yeah.
says to
I'm not
somebody.
smart enough to do much else.
Whatever.
Not sure I'm smart enough to do this job either.
Somebody might come
Find
out.
out.
I don't anticipate that.
Yeah, the folks are pretty nice here so far.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, everything's pretty good. I'm just curious, I mean,
Probably.
it's a lower move, right, but if you're following,
So.
it's my career, yeah. And I wanted to stay, I wanted to stay in North Carolina, my daughter's still at UNC.
Like you, that's fine.
It's close enough there.
Their job is to.
Say you
Yeah.
resign that job or? Yeah, I had resigned it back in May. It's kind of what we do, sometimes we just run out of rope.
So will you send us?
Yeah, I'll be doing that the same.
Time to move on. It gets time to move on, and it really kind of was, I mean, there's a lot of,
Until sometime after the.
there's a lot of
council.
development.
See, my granddaughter-
And it's been 7 years.
We have.
That's the
One
problem.
part of
with
the community
scheduling.
wanted to see the development, another part of the community didn't want to see the development. And eventually that sort of bleeds over into elections.
Yeah.
So, but you'll.
I thought I was in pretty good shape after the last election.
Did with this one.
Yes.
Lost his job.
But,
Like I said, if the minutes are, if they're
Not so
done,
much, I
even
guess.
if they're drafts, I'll get them to you so you can
Just
look
kind
at
of
them.
decided, yeah, it's really kind of time for somebody else to take a look at this thing.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yes, and,
Yeah.
is there a
You
signing
know,
process
I
for
thought I was
that?
gonna.
No, it's the same thing as this.
Same format as this?
Yeah. You guys are.
It was good, I mean, the people I work with.
As long as I do this. Yeah, we
Oh, is that because it's already- Yeah, so that's.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so.
I don't know that I'll ever be happy.
And then they can, how do you?
That's what I need.
When they-
Right now, what I don't know. There's a lot of.
We might-
Probably
Probably had streaming for a while.